Listen, if you're watching this and thinking, okay, silver's up again, I want you to pause. Because this isn't up again. This is a line being crossed, a psychological line, a balance sheet line, a somebody's about to get carried out line. Silver just broke above the $77 handle. And the most important part isn't the number. It's what that number does to the people who swore loudly that silver would never get here. They're trapped. And the trap gets tighter every dollar higher. Here's the cold reality. In normal markets, price moves first, then the story shows up later. In broken markets, the story shows up first, then price teleports. And this move, it has that teleport smell. The kind where you wake up, check your screen, and you don't even feel excitement. You feel that weird, uncomfortable pressure in your chest like, wait, why does this feel like a warning? Because $77 isn't just a chart level. It's a stress test for the entire paper silver system. It is a stress test for the banks that have spent years treating silver like a toy, something you can lean on, cap, smash, and manage. It's a stress test for the vaults. It's a stress test for delivery. It is a stress test for every short position that got comfortable selling what they didn't physically have. And yes, I'm going to say the quiet part out loud. When silver breaks and holds above this zone, the people who make the market stop acting like sellers. They start acting like buyers, panic buyers, the kind who don't care what the price is, they care what the price is doing to their risk. So let me ask you a question right now, and I want you to answer it in the comments because it tells me what kind of viewer you are. Are you watching silver to get rich in dollars? Or are you watching silver because you don't trust the system the dollars come from? Those are two completely different mindsets, and this move separates them. Today, this video is called They Are Trapped. Banks panic, buy, as silver breaks staying at 77, plus the perfect storm is here. And I'm not using perfect storm as a YouTube adjective. I mean it literally. Multiple forces are hitting at once, and each one makes the other worse. War risk psychology, physical tightness, cross-market premiums, and a derivative structure that was designed for calm conditions, now being forced to operate inside chaos. And I'm going to keep this human and blunt. If you've been in silver for years, you know the feeling. Silver spends months doing nothing, boring you to death, humiliating you. Then it moves in a way that feels personal, like it waited until you looked away. That's why people get emotional with this metal. It teaches you patience the hard way. So here's what I want from you before we go deeper. Comment one word, trade or hedge. Are you here to trade this move, or are you here because silver is your hedge against a system you don't trust? I want to see the room's psychology. All right, now let's get surgical. Because if silver is over $77 and the narrative is banks are panic buying, we have to explain what that actually looks like in the real world. Not a cartoon, not a meme, mechanisms. Why would a bank be forced to buy in size right here? Let's get into the storm. Here's the easiest way to spot a fake rally versus a real one. In a fake rally, the price moves and the physical market yawns. In a real rally, the price moves and the physical market starts acting weird. Premiums climb, product disappears, delivery windows stretch, and the most important phrase in metals becomes, we'll get back to you. If you've never tried to source physical metal at scale, you might not understand how brutal this can get. People imagine a vault full of silver bars like a cartoon treasure room, but real supply chains are messy. Bars need to be the right size, the right form, the right refinery stamp, the right location. And when demand spikes, the bottleneck is never the metal in the ground, it's the metal in the pipeline. Now, when silver pushes above $77, you see a certain type of buyer stop waiting for confirmation. Industrial buyers, procurement desks, the people who don't get paid for being clever, they get paid for not letting production stop. When they see volatility rising, they don't say, maybe it will dip. They say, lock it in before it gets worse. And that's where the physical market starts punishing the paper market, because paper can expand infinitely. Contracts can be created with a keystroke, but physical can't. Physical has friction. Physical has lead time. Physical has shipping. Physical has fabrication. And when a market transitions from paper-led to physical-led, the behavior changes. Moves get sharper. Corrections get nastier. And the people who are short start realizing they were not short a chart. They were short a thing. Let's talk about the uncomfortable part. The screen price is not always the price. It's the reference. It's the billboard. But the real transaction happens in the spread between quoted and delivered. When markets are calm, that spread is boring, small, forgettable. When markets are stressed, that spread becomes the real story. Somewhere, someone is trying to secure a large amount of silver, not for a portfolio, but for a requirement. They look at the screen, see 77 something, and say, great. Then they call, and the response is, we can do it, but not at that price, and not on that timeline. That gap between the screen and the yes, that's where the system starts cracking. This is why banks panic buy. Because banks sit in the middle. They are the bridge between paper and physical. In calm times, they can juggle. In stressed times, juggling turns into dropping knives. And here is a point that will trigger arguments. The market doesn't have to run out of silver for the price to explode. It only has to run out of silver at the right place, in the right form, at the right time. Shortages are local and specific. A shortage of deliverable bars matters more than total silver on Earth. If the deliverable pool tightens, the paper price has to rise to ration demand and pull supply out of hiding. This is where you get the weird phenomenon. Silver is available, but not available. It exists, but it's not for sale. The float shrinks, and the market becomes a tinderbox. So what does tightening physical do to paper? It increases the cost of being short, and it creates urgency. Urgency kills suppression. Because if the buyer isn't an investor, if the buyer is required, time doesn't work. They don't leave. They pay up. Now, layer 2 is where it gets nasty, cross-market pull. Because when one region is willing to pay more for real metal, it doesn't just signal demand. It drains inventory from everywhere else. There's a rule in commodities that sounds obvious until you watch it break a market. Material flows to the highest bidder, not the loudest bidder, the highest bidder. People think price discovery happens on a screen in New York and the rest of the world follows. That's only true when the physical market is loose and the paper market is trusted. When physical tightens, the real price becomes the one paid by whoever cannot afford to be wrong. That's why cross-market premiums matter so much. Because if there's a persistent premium in a major physical hub, it's the market screaming, "The screen is lying." Here's the mechanism. If silver is cheaper in one place and more expensive in another, smart intermediaries try to arbitrage it. They buy where it's cheaper, move it, sell where it's higher. This is supposed to close the gap. But what happens when the gap doesn't close? Or worse, what happens when the gap closes only by the cheap market rising? Then you learn the scary lesson. The expensive market isn't overpriced. The cheap market is underpriced. The cheap market is the discount bin. And that's when the West has to chase. The Western paper market loves the idea it sets the benchmark. But gravity moves. Gravity follows mass. And if the mass of real demand is elsewhere, the benchmark becomes a lagging indicator. This changes the behavior of banks. If you re a bank and you see metal pulled out of your ecosystem toward a higher paying one, your risk is no longer theoretical. Your risk is you become the last person trying to source metal in a panic. That's when you stop selling rallies. That's when you stop being cute. That's when you start building position defensively. And yes, that looks like panic buying. Here's the controversial take. The real battle for silver isn't investors versus banks. It's manufacturing supply chains versus paper liquidity. One side needs atoms, the other sells promises. When atoms get tight, promises get exposed. So layer 2 says this. If the pull from real physical hubs stays strong, the benchmark price has to rise to stop the drain. Not because of vibes, because of math. Now layer 3 is the most violent. The derivatives trap. This is where $77 becomes a landmine. This is where you get feedback loops. This is where you get gamma. This is where you get forced buying that has nothing to do with fundamentals and everything to do with survival. When silver breaks above a key zone like $77, it does 3 things at the same time. It invalidates a lot of short bets built in the comfort of the old range. It drags options positioning into danger, especially for anyone who sold calls expecting silver to stay capped, and it forces hedging behavior that accelerates the move. This is the trap. A short position has a built-in flaw. Your risk expands as price rises. If you're short, your losses can keep growing. That's why shorts don't lose money. They lose composure. They lose time. They lose the ability to choose. Now add the options layer. When banks sell call options, they're saying, sure, you can have upside for a fee. In calm markets, they hedge and collect premium. In violent markets, hedging becomes the story. Here's gamma without the textbook. When price rises, the people who sold you upside have to buy the thing they promised you just to avoid drowning. And the higher price goes, the more they have to buy. Their buying pushes price higher, which forces more buying. That loop is why markets go vertical and look supernatural. Now imagine that happening right as silver pushes through 77 and the crowd realizes the cap is gone. Breakout buyers on one side, forced hedgers on the other, shorts in the middle getting squeezed. That SY banks panic buy can be real, even if the bank trader's done it to you want it. Risk models don't care about pride. They care about exposure. And above this zone, exposure expands fast. So what happens next? Typically you see phases, breakout and disbelief, forced adjustment, acceleration, a violent shakeout designed to liquidate leverage, then repricing into a new range that used to look impossible. This is not the time for ego, it's the time for structure. If a 5 to 10% move can force you out, you're not investing, you're gambling. Expect a shakeout. Silver loves to punish late buyers. Watch the physical signals, not just the candle. And now I come al end with the match that lights comments. Do you think the banks will attempt one last smash to scare people out? Or do you think they've lost the ability to push it down without making the physical tightness worse? Comment it, last smash or no ammo. Because if the answer is no ammo, you're not watching a normal bull market. You're watching a repricing. And repricings don't ask permission.